Good afternoon. Welcome to the Belknap Mill. Would you like a tour? Come with me to the knitting room. In this room, we show off all of our different kinds of knitting machines. Some of them are completely ready to be used, and other ones we just have pieces and parts for, so those can't be used. This is a typical knitting machine that would have been used here in the mill during its heyday of knitting, which was from the around 1861 or so, the time of the Civil War, right up through to 1969. We made socks here at the mill. This is a machine that was actually made here in Laconia by the Williams Company, and they made all different kinds of equipment, and we have several of their knitting machines here at the mill. Now, when you knit a sock, you're really making a tube of material, a knitted tube of material, and that's what this head of latch hook needles does. There are 84 needles in this circle, and they will go up and down as need be, and they make a whole row at one time. Now, latch hook needle is really quite small, but it's got this little lever on it that goes up and catches. A sock is a series of loops connected to another group of loops, connected to another group of loops, and that's what knits a sock. Now, on our knitting machines, we can make socks with stripes on them, and we can change out the color of the toe and the heel, but we can't make any fancy designs on them. Some of the other knitting machines that were made are very fancy, and they can do all kinds of things like letters and snowflakes and different designs like that. But the type of knitting machine that we used here is like this one, and we can't do that type of design work. Now, if we move over to here, now a woman would be doing all the knitting. Men did not do the knitting. And when a woman got very good at running one machine or two machines, she could add on doing more machines at a time. And some women could work anywhere between 8 to 10 machines during the day because she never sat down. She stayed walking between all of the machines, making sure they were all running. And when she got good at it and was working a whole row of them, because she was paid by the piece, not by the hour. During most of the time when the mill was running, it was a 6-day-a-week job, and it was a 10-hour-a-day working day. So it was a very long day, very long week, and they were really quite tired at the end of it. If they had really very young children that would stay right near mama and they had no one at home to take care of them, then they could bring a small child with them to the mill, but not older children. They would have been home with Grammy or someone like that and doing their schoolwork. So this is what a typical one looks like. Now, another job that women had here in the mill is on this machine, and it's called a looping machine. And once a sock is made, those knitting machines can do everything, but they can't sew a seam. So that's what this machine here does, this looping machine. And the needles on this one are very dull. They don't hurt your hand at all when you press on them. So it was very good for them to be able to line up where that seam needed to be, and very quickly, and I'm not very good at this, at doing it fast, they would press all of this row on here. This dial would be going around in a circle, and as it went around, it would sew a seam down here at where the knitted part is that's open, and then it would trim off any excess thread, and it would shave off any of the extra knitted material, because the last thing you want is a big bump over the top of your foot. When they got done with the sock, it would look like this. It would still be inside out, and this is what the seam looked like. It was nice and neat and clean. Now, when they were done doing all of this, they didn't take the time in their jobs to turn the socks right side out. They just dropped them in a basket next to them and would keep piling them up as the day went on, and the baskets would be removed and a new empty basket would be there. So they would take the ones that they needed to do the seam on from their left, and then on their right they would pull them off and put them in a basket. The baskets would then go upstairs, and the young boys and things that would come in after school were the ones who would take these socks that were still inside out, and those boys at the ages of 13 and 14 have skinny little arms, and they could reach right into these, grab the end of the toe of the sock, and pull it right side out. And this is what the sock would look like. But the sock at this stage, this sock and this sock and this sock are all the exact same sizes, but people's feet aren't the exact same sizes. So when these socks went upstairs to our boarding area, this is what the boarders, the men who were known as boarders, would do. They would take a wooden form like this, it's very thin. They would slide a sock onto this board. They would then put it in a steam chamber for about 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, depending on what it needed, and that would size the sock. So when it came out, they would slip it right off. It would all be the correct size for the shoe size of the person they were making it for, the sock size. And then it would be matched up with another one identical to that to make a pair of socks. And if you look at the picture up here, that's what the men up in that upper picture are doing. They're in short sleeve shirts because it was a very warm room all year round and things. They would have windows open to let in cool air because those steam chambers let off a lot of heat. But that's what those boarders did. All they did all day was put socks on and take socks off and pair them up. Now that pretty much finishes making a sock, but there's one last thing that would happen. Another group of women would be sitting at tables right near the windows of the mill with single light bulbs at that time hanging over them. So most of their light came from the windows, and they would be doing the work of a finisher. And a finisher is what we think of as quality control nowadays. So they would be taking those socks and they would be looking to see if there was a piece of yarn that was pulled out, if there was still a hole in that sock, anything that would make it so that they could not sell that sock, and they would pull it out of production. And whoever unfortunately had made that sock would not get paid for it. Because this is piecework, as they call it. You got paid for how many pieces, perfect pieces, you actually made. Not just how many were made and you have mistakes in them and you still got paid. Didn't happen like that. You had to have made perfect socks for it. That's the basics of how you knit a sock on one of these knitting machines and on this looping machine. The next place we're going to go to is our powerhouse. It's how we made our own hydroelectric power, because those knitting machines weren't going to run themselves and we had to power them somehow. Now they were powered using a belt system, but we had to have a lot of equipment to make those belts run. So come with me down into the powerhouse and I'll show you what we have down here. First off, we have these really huge wheels that were used. And these wheels would have had very large leather belts on them that would come off, and they would go up through ceilings and they would connect onto other belts, because this factory was a belt-driven factory, like most factories of its time period. We didn't plug into electricity in a wall and make our machinery run. Everything was run off of a belt system. So we had to have these very, very large wheels to make that happen. We'll come down, we'll actually see some of the machinery that managed to turn all of these wheels for us. This is the real power behind the powerhouse, are these 3 pieces of equipment. And these are our water turbines. This is how we made our own power. We harnessed the power of the Winnipesaukee River, which is the river right next door to here at the mill, and we used that water to run underneath this building and to power our turbines. Now you can see it really well down here. If you look down here, you see a few interesting things. Probably the first thing most people notice are those things that are curled up that look like snakes down there. Well, they're not actually, they're fake, and they're not actually snakes. They represent freshwater eels. Because for a long time here in the Winnipesaukee River, there were a lot of freshwater eels. that were in there. And people would fish for them and put them in soups and things like that and have them for food because they were a great protein source. So it was a good food source. But what happened in the mill is they would come in with all the water, and if you got enough eels in there and everything with a lot of other scraps of leaves and things like that, it would eventually gunk up that turbine down there, which is that part that's down there, and they would actually have to shut this part down, this whole powerhouse down, and send someone down there to clean out all that area. Now, would you want to be one of the ones who went down there to clean it out? I know I wouldn't have wanted to be. But when we look down on the top of it, that is actually the turbine down there. And a turbine is a really fancy name for taking a regular water wheel and turning it onto its side. The water, instead of going into one bucket, like it would on a regular overshoot water wheel and keep going around and providing some power, when you turn it onto its side, water will go into 3 or 4 of those fins, those buckets, and really get some nice power, a nice push there. And that is what helps move all of this equipment that's up above. From here we move on to looking at some of the photographs that we've had from over the years on what happens here. This is a great one because it really shows you the equipment we just looked at up on top, these funny wheels with these wooden cogs in them. Down here is where the water turbine itself is that spins around. And when the water leaves there, it goes down here to what's called a tail race, and that's when it exits out of this whole area and back out into the river. So we take water in off the river, and we eventually send it right back into the river with anything that may come with it. Originally, the dam here was a wooden dam, and the dam keepers would have to go out and they'd have to lift boards up and down and put them in, whether they wanted to let more water through at that time or keep the water back. That's how it was controlled. Now it's a fully functioning concrete one, and they're able to control everything from the inside of the dam house itself. The mill's gone through a lot of different things over the years. Back in the late 1960s, when urban renewal came in, a lot of the buildings that were part of the mill complex were torn down. They were wooden buildings, and the only thing left standing was our brick building that we're in right now. And we're very fortunate that we still have it standing. If you were down in the basement looking at this water turbine that we looked at from up above, this is what you'd be seeing down there. And you'd see this big, huge hole, which is where the water would have gone out from. So the water's got to get out of this building somehow, and it's got to go through another large hole to exit out of the building. Down here we have some photos of the people, and people were very important in the mill because they were the ones running all of the machinery. One of the photos we have here is a lot of the men working on different types of regular machines. We would have had the foreman for the whole floor would have been sitting up here, keeping an eye on everything that's going on the floor. This gentleman, I believe, would be someone who would be doing a lot of the training because he does have a white shirt on, even though he's wearing overalls, and he's wearing a tie, which is very unusual in an area where there's a lot of machinery because ties are dangerous to have in that kind of an environment. He's got bib overalls on and the tie is tucked in to make sure that it doesn't get caught in a piece of machinery. We know this is a picture from here at the mill because we know who this gentleman is. And we know that it was his father-in-law who actually owned the mill at the time. But you can tell from how he's dressed in overalls, one of those old blue work shirts, he did not have a high-paying job. So just because you were the son-in-law of the owner didn't mean you moved up that line to a higher position any faster than any other new worker in the mill. We have pictures of women standing there, things that have been woven and stuff like that. Here are the knitting machines, and you can see some of the belts that came up and down and that ran all of the equipment. Some of these are pictures from our mill and some of them are pictures from other mills because we do tend to share information with one another so we can make all of our displays complete and give everyone a really good idea of what things looked like. If you come along this way, we can see what our electrical panel looked like. big, kind of clunky looking and everything, but some of the things that are really interesting about it, most of the dials are very plain and simple, but some of these here are actually quite artistic. So even though they were there for a specific purpose, very mechanical kind of purpose, that didn't mean that they couldn't be nice looking. So a lot of things were designed by different companies that way to actually look quite nice for us and everything else. Now, we made not only all the power that we needed to use for our mill and all of our mill buildings, but often we made an excess of power. And in making an excess of power, we were able to sell that power off. And we were able to sell it off to the city of Laconia. Because as the city grew, it couldn't always keep up with its power grid and needed to purchase power from other people. And when this lever would be put up, this light bulb comes on and it lets us know that power is from this mill is going back to the city of Laconia for their use, and we're selling power. So our owner was quite smart. He made money off of the socks that were knitted here, and he was able to make extra money off of the power that was made here in the mill, in this room. Now if you walk a little bit further down, you can see some of the other pieces of equipment that we have. We have this, which is known as a speed governor, and when all this equipment is working and it's really going around fast, these very heavy iron balls will actually come way up and almost feel like they're flying. They kind of look like wings when they come up. I will turn on the wheels and stuff, the motor and everything that's connected to everything now. Unfortunately, it never gets up to a high enough speed to really move these. But that's one of the things they would check and everything to make sure that everything was working well, and it was centrifugal force that would pull the speed governor part up. Now, gets a little bit noisy in here when we turn on this small motor that we now have our big wheels connected to, but you get a chance to see just what happens along the drive shaft here, just a little bit of the other equipment, and get to see these two big wheels going around. So I'm going to turn on the switch. Thanks for joining me for a little mini tour here at the Belknap Mill.